Part 82. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 811. Xiejin nodded, probably. Xian Yuanyao looked at him silently without saying a word, obviously waiting for him to continue speaking. But I'm different from the shadow guards. The shadow guards have undergone special training, and their skills are naturally superb. Killings are always killed with one move. It's impossible for me, the son of a powerful official, to train according to the standards of the shadow guards, so my martial arts is slightly inferior to them. Lesser. Xian Yuanyao frowned. The time I went to challenge the Lord with you before, you didn't use your full strength. Of course not. Xiejin shook his head seriously. I did use all my strength in the martial arts competition, but the killing moves taught by the shadow guard are different from ordinary martial arts. The moves are meant to be bloody. Do you think I dare to do it in front of the master? Directly use the killing move. Although it is impossible to defeat the master even if he uses his ultimate move, the things he cannot do are things he cannot even think about, regardless of whether he can succeed or not. Xian Yuanyao understood. Indeed, you can't. A competition is a competition. If you really dare to use a killing move against your master, the nature will be completely different. Not to mention killing him on the spot is not an exaggeration. No one from the 9 clans would dare to kill him even if he is accused of treason and murder. Say what? Xiejin said, what are you thinking about? I suddenly thought of the time when you were taught a lesson by the Lord, he said in a delicate tone. You were really unjust. Even if it were me, I would have given you a good beating. With such powerful martial arts, he was actually plotted on the doorstep of his home, which directly led to the death of 5 guards on duty outside the imperial study room. Although Xian Yuanyao was extremely distressed at the time, thinking about it now, the punishments given by the cane were basically light. Xiejin raised his eyebrows. It's been so long ago, why should Yao Yao mention it again? Xian Yuanyao raised his hand to support his chin and looked at him thoughtfully. Did you ever resist back then? Of course I have. Xiejin recalled the time when he was young and ignorant and couldn't help but chuckle, when I learned that these 2 people were not arranged for me by my father, but that their master was someone else. I was the one who, a 15-year-old boy, is still young and unruly. He is naturally unwilling to accept the fate of others, let alone have 2 such dangerous people around him. After a pause, it's true that they taught me martial arts, but weren't they also monitoring my every move? With my temper at that time, how could I tolerate it? That's true. It's a pity that you can't beat them. Xian Yuanyao recalled the rumors about the 9th master of the Xie family and couldn't help but joked, otherwise, they would probably just peel off their skins and make them into drum heads, right? Xiejin pretended to think, maybe it will. Xian Yuanyao sneered, what happened next? Later, Xiejin sighed melancholy, since we can't defeat them, we naturally let them get away as far as possible. Xian Yuanyao was silent for a moment. The situation between us seemed to be exactly the opposite. He was the one who could not be kicked out even by his master. He had to endure countless pains in his body to learn his skills, but Xiejin was directly arranged by his master to teach him martial arts with 2 people. After thinking about it, he said resentfully, why do I feel it's a little unfair? Xiejin smiled, then I met the Lord, in an unpleasant way. Xian Yuanyao nodded slowly, it won't be too pleasant to think about it. A young, proud, and wanton son of a powerful official was inexplicably assigned his fate. It was certainly impossible for him to accept it so naturally, but the Lord must have a way to make him accept it. What happened back then seemed quite frustrating at the time, but now that I think about it, it seems quite interesting. Xiejin raised his lips, especially now that I have you, I feel even more fortunate to have been chosen by the Lord, and even more fortunate to have no fight to the end. The consequences of stubborn resistance are not only missing out on Xian Yuanyao today, but also the fate of the Xie family may not be guaranteed. Some things seem to be destined to happen. Although no one knows what will happen tomorrow, if you look back, many things have already been doomed. Xian Yuanyao was once in a rare unpredictable moment. If you let go at the beginning, who could have expected that I, a dignified heir to the Dongling royal family, would fall into the hands of the regent of another country so easily? Yao Yao is right, Xiejin nodded, but rather than destiny, I prefer to believe that this is because the Lord is extremely skilled and cunning, and has arranged all the usable chess pieces well in advance. There is no way to escape from his grasp. Xian Yuanyao was silent for a moment. Are you a chess piece? Looking at the overall situation, it is indeed just a chess piece, Xiejin said. This world is a game of chess played by the master. We are all chess pieces, but chess pieces can also be divided into king chess and useless chess. We belong to the king chess. Xian Yuanyao shook his head. You are a chess piece, I am not. Xiejin frowned. Yao Yao. Do you think there is a chess piece on the chessboard that you can't even get rid of? Xiejin smiled and said, if you didn't show up, the Lord might have made arrangements for you long ago. Hearing this, Xian Yuanyao seemed to think that what he said made sense, and frowned again and again. When I go back to find a chance, I have to ask the Lord to see if he arranged for me back then. Yao Yao Xiejin sighed and wanted to say something more, but soon got back to business. Let's do business first, and we can continue to discuss the events of the past when we have the opportunity. Xian Yuanyao hummed, stood up and said, get ready to work. Xiejin walked out with him, saying as he walked, I thought Ming Zi would come up with a way to get out in a hurry, and immediately take the envoy away from Shuashan and rush back to inform the news. I didn't expect that he would be willing to put himself in danger and drive a bug to deliver the message. The Emperor of Nanyu seems to have an inexplicable obsession with Her Majesty the Queen. Xian Yuanyao frowned. If it wasn't for that prophecy, how can we explain his behavior? We can figure out whether he is obsessed or not later, but he has chosen to stay here now, and he must still be determined to persuade you to rebel. Xiejin reached out and pulled his hair. Did Yao Yao really not think of becoming the emperor? Xian Yuanyao stopped in his tracks and turned his head to look at him. Ajin. Xiejin looked at him. Don't mention such words again in the future. Xian Yuanyao frowned. His tone was particularly serious. Even if it's a joke, someone will take it seriously. If someone else hears it, have you thought about the consequences? Xiejin was silent. Besides, can this matter be joked about casually? His tone became a little tougher. It is a capital crime to discuss the crown prince without authorization. You actually asked me directly whether I wanted to. Don't joke about this topic again in the future. Xiejin pursed his lips and nodded obediently. Yes. Xian Yuanyao pinched his face and softened his tone. Although the master will not be serious with you, we can't lose our sense of propriety. There are some things that cannot be done even if you die, and some words that cannot be said even if you die. You should know better than me. Xiejin was already happy when he heard his tone like coaxing a child, but his face still had an obedient expression of admitting his mistakes. I know, I promise not to do it again in the future. Xian Yuanyao touched his head. Okay, get to work. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbspeed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 812. When Xian Yuanyao arrived at the school grounds, Ming Zi was still lying in the room and didn't open the door again all day. After delivering the poison, he lay on the bed as if asleep. He didn't even get up when the soldiers brought him food. In the evening, Xian Yuanyao summoned all the generals in the army in the military tent. After explaining the attack plan to them in detail, he said calmly, on the surface, there are 100,000 troops in Quyang City, but the actual combat power is not that many. The remaining troops, the morale of the defeated generals has not yet been restored, and the number of 100,000 is not something to be afraid of. The location of the granary on the map was clearly marked in red and could be seen clearly under the light. Xian Yuanyao pointed to the terrain next to the granary. Ge Yunhui is a headstrong general. The South Vietnamese envoy Ming Zi gave him false news. Tonight, he will move at least half of his troops to ambush near the granary. The layout of the heavy ambush should be comfortable here. The general is here. You lead 2,000 cavalry to approach Quang Granary via a small road. Don't make too much noise, but make a little noise quietly. You must make the other party think that you are going for the grain and fodder, but remember not to follow. They clashed head-on, taking as long as possible. After a pause, Xian Yuanyao raised his eyes. Your weapons tonight are bows and arrows, do you understand what I mean? The general understands. The meaning of using bows and arrows is to only shoot from a distance. Change the place after a fight, and do not allow 2,000 people to enter the enemy's ambush circle. If the opponent loses their temper and starts to get aggressive, they will ride away on horseback. All the obsidian soldiers have excellent riding skills, and their forehooves are always faster than their two legs. Go ahead. Yes. And Yu received the military order with his fists clasped, then turned around and left with strong, sonorous steps. Starting from the granary, but not really going for the food and grass, this cry goes east and west. Yu Fan, Yang Ting. The general is here. Tonight at 3 o'clock in the morning, the gates of Quang City will be opened wide. The two of you will enter the city with your cavalry. All the soldiers guarding the city will be killed. No one will be left alive. The last general takes command. After Yu Fan agreed, he hesitated and said, "Don't you need to bring a ladder to attack the city? If someone opens the door for you, just lead them and rush in." "What kind of ladder should you bring?" Xian Yuanyao raised a cold eyebrow. "When I lead troops to fight, I will take the life of the opponent, not let you die." Yu Fan perked up and said, "Yes." Others took advantage of the situation and shouted, "General, you are mighty." Xian Yuanyao shouted, "Why don't you go quickly? I will retire at the end." "A bunch of brats," Xian Yuanyao snorted coldly, "moving a ladder? Do you really think that you have become indestructible after long-term training? Even if you move a ladder, you can't stop the rain of arrows from the tower. How many brats will this general have to sacrifice?" The other generals couldn't help laughing when they heard this, but their hearts couldn't help being moved. There is no one who is immortal on the battlefield. From the day they choose to join the army, they are ready to die on the battlefield at any time, but if they have a choice, who is willing to die? They are lucky to be able to follow a general who is good at strategizing and has the lives of his soldiers in mind at all times. "Yun Zhang, you lead 5,000 golden armor troops from the west road, go around to the west gate, and storm in." Xian Yuanyao ordered one by one. "Remember to bring more ropes and bows and arrows." "Yes." "Jin Jun, bring 10,000 people in through the east gate." The last general takes command. The neat military orders were passed down in an orderly manner, and the generals accepted the orders without hesitation, with a heavy momentum. It was destined that Quang City would have an unforgettable battle tonight. If Quang City is destroyed, it means that the South Vietnamese border is completely lost, and the scattered troops will no longer be able to withstand the cavalry expedition. After all the generals in the army took the order and left, Xian Yuanyao turned to look at Xiejin. "It's time for us to set off." Xiejin raised his lips and smiled. "It is an honor for me to fight side by side with Yao Yao." As expected by Xian Yuanyao, the outside of Quang Granary was heavily guarded. Quang City Commander Ge Yunhui transferred almost half of the city's troops to the vicinity of the granary. However, in the middle of the night, a horn suddenly sounded outside the city gate. This sound immediately caused chaos in the city. Before the commander could issue an order, 18 figures quietly climbed onto the city tower. The archers guarding the city wall had their necks wiped one by one. Several figures went down the stairs, and before any military orders arrived, they worked together to open the city. Door, the inside should be closed and the outside should be closed. As the dull sound slowly sounded, the cavalry swarmed in like a tide, like muffled thunder, which made the troops in the city dizzy. Wherever the iron cavalry passed, the soldiers holding spears and swords had almost no backhand power. The obsidian army seemed to be the god of death at night coming to seek life. Their postures were strong and their expressions were cold. Their spears were sweeping across and unstoppable. They were fighting and howling on the towers. Corpses kept falling from the tall towers, and the sound of swords entering the body was terrifying. The army marched straight in, leaving corpses strewn everywhere they passed. The situation was almost a one-sided massacre. The blood was thick and murderous intent filled every corner of the city. Xian Yuanyao sat on the horse and coldly ordered, "Kill all those who resist, and spare the lives of those who are captured without mercy." In Xian Yuanyao's words, even if 100,000 soldiers and horses are killed with swords, they will kill them until they are weak. However, the fact is that the cavalry is very powerful in combat and it is impossible to really kill everyone. The city gate is open. If anyone escapes, they will without the ability to pursue. After most of the elite main forces in the city were wiped out, the city's defense had actually fallen. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 813. At most 2 days after Xiejin arrives at Shuashan, Xian Yuanyao will attack Qiang. Rongyu pointed with a long finger at the city connected by the red line on the map, and said in a gentle voice, "The main forces of South Vietnam will be concentrated in Qiang, and Qiang is away from Shuashan. There is only a few miles away. Once the city is broken, morale will be greatly reduced, and there will be no resistance from Fengshi to Luanjiang. Once the border pass is lost, 60,000 cavalry will march straight in, heading straight for the capital of South Vietnam." Nan 11 smiled and said, "Why 2 days after Xiejin arrived? The time spent on the road for food and grass was probably more than 20 days. Judging from the time when the victory report came, it should be around September 20 that Xian Yuanyao's army broke through Shuashan city and successfully stationed it. After entering the city, in addition to reorganizing the army, we have to appease the people in the city." Rongyu smiled faintly, "We can't rest until everything is settled. The army is tired after a long journey. Since it has captured a city, it is natural for both the people and the horses to take a good rest and recharge their batteries." Nan 11 hummed, "You're right." When Xiejin escorted the grain, grass, and clothing to Shuashan, the soldiers had rested for several days and had recovered a lot of their physical strength. Knowing that His Majesty always cared about the front-line soldiers, the officers and soldiers were naturally grateful and boosted their morale. At this time, they attacked the city is the best time. It makes sense. Nan 11 nodded. Xian Yuanyao used to capture Shuashan city to capture the thieves and capture the king. What strategy should be used in Qiang city? Rongyu smiled lightly. He has been followed by the 18 guards. These 18 people are very skilled. Xian Yuanyao should let them find a way to sneak into Qiang city in advance and cooperate inside and outside. As long as someone opens the city gate for him and the cavalry flies into Qiang city, the South Vietnamese soldiers in the city will have no power to resist. Xian Yuanyao can occupy Qiang in 2 days at most. Nan 11 raised her eyebrows. Do you know Xian Yuanyao's tactics so well? Rongyu said, you can roughly guess his fighting method. Nan 11 sighed, fortunately, the leader of South Vietnam is not you. Rongyu pondered for a moment and slowly shook his head. The 60,000 cavalry brought by Xian Yuanyao are enough to crush any army in South Vietnam. This is one of the reasons why he can quickly defeat the city. No matter who the leader is, he can only defeat the city and the enemy early. The only difference is that the city was broken late. Nan 11 understood. The cavalry is powerful and invincible. This is also the reason why Rong Yu spent a huge amount of money to train Xian Yu and Yao. In addition to being more powerful when attacking cities and territories on the battlefield, it is also to reduce the casualties of soldiers. In this way, no matter how powerful the general is, he has to be wary in front of such a cavalry. What's more, the main force of South Vietnam's troops is not actually in Quang. The situation in Huainan should be relatively calm now. Nan 11 turned her eyes slightly. Half of South Vietnam's troops are concentrated on contending with Huainan. If war breaks out in Huainan, South Vietnam will really be attacked from both sides, huh? Hearing the difference in her tone, Rong Yu couldn't help but turn his head and look at her. What's wrong? Rong Yu. Nan 11's eyes fell on the map, and suddenly she raised her eyebrows and raised a smile at the corner of her mouth. I just discovered something. Xian Yu and Yao said he won't come back to see you until he captures 7 cities in South Vietnam. But if we set out from Shuashan, the 7th city captured will be the capital of South Vietnam. Does Xian Yu and Yao want to directly destroy South Vietnam? Nan 11 smiled gently. Did this guy say the 7 cities casually, or did he do it on purpose? The general conquered the city and conquered the territory without saying anything casually. Rong Yu said, the city, terrain, and defense on the map have already been imprinted in my heart, and there is no room for error. Nan 11 was silent for a moment and smiled casually. So, Nanyu has no chance of survival this time. Rong Yu stretched out his hand to take her into his arms, and said in a calm voice, those who dare to take advantage of you should not have a way out in the first place. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 814. General Xian Yu and Yao was trained by Rong Yu, so he naturally understood his tactics. Just as Rong Yu expected, once the gate of Quang was opened, the cavalry poured in like a tide, and the Nanyu defenders had no power to resist. The main army fell under the cavalry one by one, and the scattered soldiers in the city fled wildly. Even the main general Ge Yunhui hid after discovering that he had been tricked, which made Xian Yu and Yao really unhappy. The soldiers under his command died, were injured, and fled, but he, the main general, actually hid. A team of cavalry rushed over, and Yun Zhang, the leader, reported loudly, General, the west gate has been broken. All the enemy troops have been killed. Xian Yu and Yao nodded, well done. Another team of cavalry rushed over, and Jin Jun reported, General, the east gate has been broken. Xian Yu and Yao praised, good job. Riding past, corpses were everywhere in the city, and the smell of blood was strong. General, the South Vietnamese troops outside the North Gate granary are setting fire to the granary. Please give us your instructions. Setting fire to the granary? Xian Yu and Yao was furious. Yun Zhang, Jin Jun. Here. Take people to rescue food and grass immediately, and kill the Nanyu army that is still resisting. Yes. Xian Yu and Yao ordered, 18 guards, turn Quang City upside down and find Ge Yunhui. Yes. Xiejin rode his horse and followed Xian Yu and Yao, listening to his orders one by one, with a raised eyebrow. Nanyu was defeated and didn't even want to leave food and grass for us. It seems that they have realized Yao Yao's might. This city can't be saved. The city can't be saved, Xian Yu and Yao snorted coldly, this general will make them unable to save the country. If they have the guts, they will burn the emperor's treasury. The army searched for the remaining Nanyu army in the city. All the surrendered soldiers were taken away and imprisoned. The people in Kweang City were frightened by the cruelty of the war. The fear of the destruction of the country and the family made them stay indoors and dare not even show their faces. Will Ji Yunhui hide in the homes of the people? No. Xian Yuanyao shook his head and pointed to the southeast. Most of the people in Kweang City live in the South City. The military strongholds are all stationed with soldiers. Ordinary people will not come here. They are afraid of war recently and are unlikely to show up here on their own initiative. Xian Yuanyao continued, the granary is in the north of the city. Ji Yunhui got the news and arranged a large army to protect the granary. He was also in the north, but after we attacked from the city gate, he suddenly disappeared. Prince, the leader of the 18 guards suddenly reported, Ji Yunhui escaped from the city and is now heading towards Fengxi. Xian Yuanyao was really stunned. Escaped? Yes. Xian Yuanyao turned his head and looked at Xiejin. Ji Yunhui abandoned his soldiers and fled by himself. Yes. Xiejin nodded, the news from the 18 guards should be correct. Xian Yuanyao gritted his teeth coldly, this coward. Normal. Xiejin said, Ji Yunhui was able to hold military power because of his relationship with the Queen of Nanyu. It is human nature to be afraid of death. Xian Yuanyao was so angry that he wanted to hit someone, and coldly ordered, clean up the battlefield. Yes. The leader of the 18 guards said, my lord, don't you chase Ji Yunhui. No. Xian Yuanyao sneered, anyway, they are all autumn grasshoppers, and they won't jump for long. The next step is to clean up the post-war problem. Ji Yunhui fled with a few of his confidants. Xian Yuanyao was too lazy to chase him, so he just asked someone to bring the mayor of Kweang City over, and ordered him to take people to appease the people in the city, and tell them that the Dongling army would not harm the unarmed people, but no one should seek death. The Jinjia army lit a pile of bonfires outside the city. In order to avoid too many dead people being infected with the plague, all the corpses were dragged out and burned on the spot. There was a lot of blood on the streets in the city that needed to be cleaned up. Xian Yuanyao ordered his generals to lead people to clean up the battlefield one by one. Xiejin said, Yao Yao. Xian Yuanyao was still angry, Ji Yunhui deserves to die, such a person should be killed with 9 clans. He was not angry about not being able to capture Ji Yunhui alive, but as a main general, Ji Yunhui actually abandoned his soldiers and fled alone at the moment of life and death, which was simply unworthy of being a general. It is true that he should be killed with 9 clans, but that is the business of the Emperor of Nanyu. Xiejin said, if Ji Yunhui has already predicted the end of Nanyu and cannot defend the city, the capital of Nanyu will soon fall. By then, the Emperor will not be able to save him, who can kill his 9 clans. So it is important to escape now. General Yu Fan rode over, we should lead our men to pursue the victory and go directly to the capital of Nanyu. No need. Xian Yuanyao rejected his suggestion. First, clean up Kweang City. How much of the granary in the city has been saved? The rescue was timely, and only a small half was lost. So our food and grass are very abundant. Xian Yuanyao said, in this case, we should follow the old rules and rest for 2 days after sweeping the battlefield, and then formulate the next attack plan. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 815. Don't chase a desperate enemy. This was what Rong Yu once said, and Xian Yuanyao has always kept it in mind. Even if he is sure that Ji Yunhui has really become a desperate enemy and there is no conspiracy waiting for him ahead, he will not take any risks for the victory that is in sight. Cities are conquered one by one, and we cannot rush for success. No matter how strong the soldiers are, they are still flesh and blood and need to rest. The quick success on the battlefield often puts the lives of at least thousands of soldiers in danger. This fact was verified again 2 days later. Post-war affairs are distributed in a measured manner. Some people are responsible for cleaning the battlefield, some are responsible for handling prisoners, and some go out to spy on military intelligence. All matters are arranged in an orderly manner. Shuashan is close to Quyang, but Quyang and Fengshi are nearly 80 miles apart. It takes a certain amount of time to find out the military intelligence. Xian Yuanyao originally wanted to send his 18 guards to find out the situation, but was opposed by Xiejin. The 18 guards made great contributions in the Battle of Quyang, but they are really tired. They ambushed in advance, hid their bodies, attacked the enemy, opened the city gates and killed the enemy with the soldiers. They have not had a good rest for 3 consecutive days. Let Minjian and Mingmei do the job of spying on Fengshi's military intelligence. Although it sounds easy to ambush in the enemy's army, it is very risky. The nerves must be tense at all times, and you must be alert and not slack off. The slightest movement can make people nervous. Xian Yuanyao heard this and nodded slowly. Okay, Minjian and Mingmei have profound martial arts skills and top skills. They move as fast as ghosts at night and are not easy to be discovered. Letting them to spy on the military intelligence can save time and reduce risks. So Xian Yuanyao ordered the 18 guards to rest first and listen to his orders after they have enough energy. Minjian and Mingmei are fast. They can travel at night and return early the next morning. However, the news they brought back this time made people feel terrified. Ji Yunhui fled to Fengshi, but Fengshi has now become a dead city. Dead city, Xian Yuanyao frowned. What do you mean? Mingyan reported, there is no army defending Fengshi city, it is as quiet as an empty city. Xian Yuanyao was stunned, then his eyebrows sank slightly. This is not normal. There is an unusual smell in the city, Mingmei said. The 2 subordinates did not dare to approach. Not daring to approach means 2 things. One is that the specific situation in the city has not been figured out yet, and the other is that the city is weird. Even Mingmei and Mingyan have predicted the danger, so they took the initiative to stay away. Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao frowned at the same time. It seems that it is right not to chase the desperate enemy. Xiejin smiled lightly. It is also right not to dare to approach. Mingyan and Mingmei bowed their heads and said nothing. Xian Yuanyao frowned slightly, and was silent for a long time before saying lightly, you 2 should also go to rest first. There is nothing for you to do today. The 2 stood still. Go and have a rest, Xiejin said. If you are hungry, find something to eat. Mingyan and Mingmei then took the order and left. It was already dawn. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin had not slept all night. There were many things to do after the war, and it didn't make sense for them to sleep while the soldiers were working. And now, Xian Yuanyao had no mood to sleep. The slender body leaned against the chair. The young man frowned slightly, and began to think about the situation in Fengshi city. Xiejin didn't disturb him, just sat beside him and accompanied him quietly. Ajin Xian Yuanyao raised his eyes and said in a gentle voice, you go and rest first, you don't have to stay here with me. What nonsense are you talking about? Xiejin frowned. I finally got the opportunity to stay with you for a few days by delivering food and grass, and you're going to drive me away. I'm afraid you'll be tired. You're not tired, why should I be tired? Xian Yuanyao looked at him, silent for a moment, but didn't force it anymore, but asked, what do you think of the results of Minjian and Mingmei's investigation? Xiejin shrugged, I'm not a military general, how can I judge the situation on the battlefield so quickly? Xian Yuanyao looked at him without saying a word. What's that look in Yao Yao's eyes? Xiejin raised his eyebrows, do you suddenly feel that I'm nothing special? Xian Yuanyao shook his head. Ji Yunhui had already prepared for defeat. If Fengshi is really a dead city, he probably wants to die with the Dongling army. Xiejin was slightly surprised. Why does Yao Yao make such a judgment? Although a general is not subject to the orders of the king when he is away from the battlefield, deserting the battlefield is a serious crime that will punish the 9 clans, and it is a great shame and humiliation. You will be nailed to the pillar of shame for the rest of your life, and even if you die, you will be infamous for thousands of years. Xian Yuanyao said in a light tone. Ji Yunhui abandoned his soldiers without even fighting and fled to Fengshi alone. Fengshi happened to have an abnormal situation, there must be a conspiracy. Xiejin nodded, Yao Yao makes sense. Xian Yuanyao frowned. His judgment was not based on conjecture, and there were three doubts. First, Ji Yunhui, as the main general, escaped without even showing his face. It was outrageous no matter how you think about it. Second, if the Nanyu city was destroyed, Ji Yunhui would not be able to escape anywhere. If the Nanyu city was not destroyed, the emperor would not easily forgive a general who defected in the battle. Third, if he really defected, Ji Yunhui had no reason to hide in an empty city with loose guards and almost no defense, unless he deliberately wanted to lure the Dongling Iron Cavalry to chase him in. So the conclusion is that there must be a conspiracy. Xian Yuanyao thought for a moment, but he didn't come up with a conclusion, but it didn't stop him from ordering his men to be on high alert. Yu Fan, give orders to strengthen the defense on the city tower. No one in the city is allowed to go out without the order of this general, and no one outside the city is allowed to come in. Yes. In extraordinary times, extraordinary measures must be used. Xian Yuanyao said, if you see someone approaching from outside on the city tower, shoot 2 arrows from 100 meters away to warn and stop him. If he continues to approach, the third arrow will take his life directly. Yes. Yu Fan quickly took the order to make arrangements. I suspect Ji Yunhui will use poison. Xian Yuanyao's eyebrows were heavy, and it is a poison that can be transmitted through air or water, so if the soldiers rashly chase into the city, they will definitely be in danger. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 816. Xiejin nodded slowly. Although the large-scale use of poison on the battlefield will be frowned upon, when the country is ruined and the family is destroyed, they probably no longer care about the issue of face and reputation. Of course, the most important thing is where did the poison come from? Xian Yuanyao didn't speak, his expression was calm when he was meditating alone, and his handsome eyebrows seemed to have a bit of indescribable pressure at this time, making people dare not easily interrupt his train of thought. Xiejin said nothing. Although his brain is sufficient, he is no better than Xian Yuanyao in matters on the battlefield. He can exchange opinions with Xian Yuanyao, but it will not disrupt his thoughts when he is thinking. Although he already had a terrible idea in his mind. Epidemic, Xian Yuanyao said, his voice cold and emotionless, this is the most vicious and terrifying method. I'm not sure yet whether they used this method, but even if they didn't, it shouldn't be much different. Xiejin raised his eyebrows slightly and stared at Xian Yuanyao quietly for a moment. I have the same idea as you. A place that neither Nether Nightmare nor Netherworld May can dare to approach must be really scary. Both Ming Yan and Ming Mei are highly skilled and have a keen sense of smell. They can detect danger earlier than ordinary experts. The reason why they dare not enter the city is not because they are afraid of death, but because they are worried about passing on something to other people when they come back. They all know it in their hearts, so Xiejin will never blame the two for failing to do things well. On the contrary, I was glad that these two people were sent to investigate the situation last night. I finally understand why Yao Yao is not greedy for merit. Xiejin sighed, if I really chased Ji Yunhui when I learned that he was running away, I'm afraid the consequences would be disastrous. If there is really an epidemic in the city, any number of soldiers who pursue it will die. But they will not die immediately, but they will have to watch themselves being infected with the virus, and there is no cure. The psychological torture and the process of other soldiers watching their comrades die is the cruelest thing. Xian Yuanyao raised his eyes to look at the sky outside, stood up and said, you stay here, I'll go out. Xiejin stood up and asked, where are Yao Yao going? The city tower. Xian Yuanyao said, I'm going to check on the defense changes on the city tower. You stay here and I'll be back soon. After a pause, it's just dawn now. There shouldn't be any surprises today. Let's wait until night before taking action. Xiejin seemed to want to say something, but when he caught a glimpse of Xian Yuanyao in military uniform, he finally said nothing and nodded slowly, then you come back early. This is Xian Yuanyao's battlefield. Xiejin was ordered to send food and grass over and stay here with him for a few days. However, unless necessary, Xiejin did not intend to interfere too much in matters on the battlefield. Xian Yuanyao nodded and left quickly. Xiejin watched him go away, until the young man in silver uniform left his sight. Xiejin turned around and entered the inner room, lying on Xian Yuanyao's bed, slowly closing his eyes, but what he was thinking about in Fengshi City was condition. The battlefield is changing rapidly, and dangers are everywhere. Yao Yao, a general with more than 10,000 people, may seem to be in a good position, but in fact he bears the responsibility for the life and death of all soldiers. The greater the power, the greater the responsibility, the less he can be greedy for credit and rash advancement. It is said that the success of one general will cause thousands of bones to wither. Since ancient times, the achievements of generals have been piled up by thousands of lives. A little negligence can break countless families. The upright and kind-hearted little leopard will never risk the lives of thousands of soldiers for the sake of his own achievements. The victory he wants is based on the least sacrifice, so he must fight a sure battle. Yao Yao. Xiejin lay quietly, twisting these two words on the tip of his heart, which made him feel more at ease than ever before. I used to think that the word powerful minister sounded majestic, and the word general sounded even more majestic and glorious. However, the longer I worked under my master, the more I felt the overwhelming responsibility. I walked on thin ice and was cautious. My concern was not Her Majesty the Queen and the Regent. The king's disappointment is the pressure from the common people and innocent lives in the world. The ninth master of the Xie family, who had always been proud and willful, clearly felt that something about him was different from before. He was growing and becoming mature, and he was no longer the legitimate son of a powerful official who could not tolerate anyone in his eyes. Loyally following a master who had the world in mind, his mind became broader and broader, and he began to care about the common people without realizing it. Falling in love with an upright and kind-hearted young man, his heart became softer and he always cared about what he cared about, which gradually became a habit. Xiejin recognized the changes in himself and felt happy about them. It was almost noon when Xian Yuanyao came back, and Xiejin had already fallen asleep. Perhaps due to their trust in Xian Yuanyao, Xiejin felt that there was nothing they could not solve, so when Xian Yuanyao came back, he found Xiejin sleeping soundly. Standing in front of the bed and looking at it, Xian Yuanyao raised the corners of his lips slightly, then turned around to wash up, change his clothes, and didn't eat anything. He quietly lay down next to Xiejin, closed his eyes, and slept quietly. For 2 hours. Xiejin turned over and put his arms around the young man's waist in a completely domineering manner, with one leg still wrapped around him, like an octopus. It was already evening when I woke up. Recently, they often choose to move in the evening, because it is close to night. After getting up, changing clothes and getting ready, the sky gradually becomes dark. With the cover of darkness, many actions will become easier. Nothing unusual was found on the tower today. No. Xian Yuanyao drank a cup of tea and turned to look at Xiejin. I plan to go to Fengshi in person tonight. Xiejin did not question or object to this, and just said, I will go with you. Xian Yuanyao said, if I don't want you to go, you will definitely not agree, right? Yao Yao understands me, just like I understand you. Xiejin smiled lightly. I respect your responsibility as the commander of an army and will never interfere with any of your decisions. You must also respect my feelings of caring about my beloved and not interfere with my decisions. Xian Yuanyao blushed, "Who is your beloved?" Yu Xiejin stretched out his hand and pinched his face, "Don't think that just because you are a commander of an army, you can change your relationship with me." Xian Yuanyao glared at him, "You can be more reserved." Xiejin was about to speak when a report from the 18 guards came from outside, "My lord." Xian Yuanyao said nothing more, opened the door and walked out, and Xiejin followed behind him. "My lord," the leader of the 18 guards said, "I request to go to Fengshi city to investigate the situation." Xian Yuanyao said, "You don't need to go to Fengshi. I have other tasks for you." "My lord. Shuashan is now my territory. You go back and guard it for me. No one is allowed to act recklessly in my territory," Xian Yuanyao ordered, "especially Ming Zi and his envoys. If they dare to mess around, kill them directly." The 18 guards bowed their heads and accepted the order. Yes. Shuashan city had just changed its owner. Xian Yuanyao left 8,000 cavalry to guard it and set up a strict formation to strictly prohibit anyone from taking advantage of his victory. The 18 guards quickly accepted the order and left. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin changed into black clothes and were about to go out of the city to Fengshi fully armed, but suddenly An Yi reported, "General, there is a young man named Mo Lingan outside the city who wants to see you." "Mo Lingan?" Xian Yuanyao was surprised and turned to look at Xiejin. Xiejin's lips curled up slightly, and he smiled happily, "This guy came just in time." Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 817. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin quickly mounted their horses and galloped towards the city tower. Mo Lingan did not come alone. Behind him were two well-dressed men. The journey was dusty and his hair looked less tidy and clean. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin walked up to the city tower and looked at the three men sitting on horseback outside the city gate. Sure enough, it was Mo Lingan. Xiejin raised his eyebrows casually and asked in a loud voice, "Who is under the city? Tell me your name." He had been asked this before, and now he was asking others so condescendingly. It was quite interesting that the situation was changing. Mo Lingan raised his eyes to look at the tall tower and sarcastically said, "Master Xieju, is he longing for his husband and has traveled thousands of miles to find her?" All the generals on the tower suddenly suppressed their laughter. Xian Yuanyao dressed in military uniform and asked majestically, "Mo Lingan, who asked you to come here?" "Your master asked me to come," Mo Lingan said calmly, "I have the information that the general needs most. Do you want to continue talking nonsense, or let me in first? The military situation is urgent right now, and we cannot let people into the city at will," Xiejin said in a leisurely tone. "What if a traitor sneaks in and wants to harm my dongling soldiers? Can't you just let people in?" Mo Lingan raised his eyebrows, "Are you not a human being?" Xiejin said, "I am different from you." "Yes, it's different," Mo Lingan nodded, "you are the Xian Yuan Xie family, the daughter-in-law of General Xian Yuan. I don't have this honor." The soldiers on the city tower coughed slightly and tried to maintain their serious and awe-inspiring postures calmly. The young man outside the city seemed to be an acquaintance of their general. His tone of voice sounded unguarded and hostile, and he even joked freely, and his status should not be low. Mo Lingan? Yu Fan and An Yi thought for a moment and found that the name was somewhat familiar, but not very familiar. But this is normal. Mo Lingan's father did not have a particularly high official position in the court, and the Mo family was not a particularly noble family. In addition, these generals did not have much contact with the noble princes of the imperial capital and spent most of the year in the military camp. Lingan was away from the imperial capital all year round, so it was normal for them not to be familiar with each other. They even doubted whether Lingen was from the imperial capital. But as long as the generals know each other, it doesn't matter whether they are familiar or not. Where did you come from? Xian Yuanyao confirmed. Lingen seemed to understand his concerns and said calmly, "Don't worry, I'm not coming from the direction of Fengxi, but the news I brought is about Fengxi and it will be useful to you." Xian Yuanyao felt relieved after hearing this, as long as they did not come from Fengxi. If they came from Fengxi, even if it was Lingen, he would not let him enter the city easily. "Open the city gate." The city gate slowly opened, and Lingen and the two men behind him entered the city. The city gate was quickly closed behind them, and martial law was entered again. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin went down from the tower and went to their temporary stay with Lingen. "I have been collecting information for the past 2 days." Lingen sat on the horse, walking alongside Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao, and said in a calm tone, "Time is limited, so we cannot be detailed about everything, but we cannot omit information that is of vital importance to people's lives." "No need to show off." Xiejin turned his head and glanced at him. "We were planning to leave the city tonight to find out the situation. Yao Yao and I are very happy that you came in time. It saved us time. It's all thanks to Mr. Mo. We will also talk to the Lord after we return, and those who deserve the reward will never escape." Lingen sneered, "If my guess is correct, you are responsible for transporting grain and grass this time. Since the grain and grass have been delivered, why hasn't Mr. Xieju gone back yet? Is he using his power for personal gain?" Xiejin counterattacked, "You should have done a lot of things like using power for personal gain." Lingen said, "I don't have the courage like you. I just don't want to argue with you. Otherwise, if you are away all the time, I will be able to catch some excuses. You can't be busy with business every day, right? If I ask anyone to check, they will find that you are enjoying yourself." "Evidence," Xiejin said in a calm voice, "we are all in the same boat, and turning a blind eye is what a smart person should do. Otherwise, you will harm others and not benefit yourself." Xian Yuanyao listened to them and frowned. "What kind of people on the same boat? You pretend to be the king of the mountain, and you turn a blind eye? Believe it or not, I have revealed all your details." "Prince Yao, calm down." Lingen said calmly, "The 9th master of the Xie family will never change his ungrateful behavior. You don't have to be the same as him. Are we familiar with you?" Xian Yuanyao looked at him. "Don't say that to him." Lingen was silent for a moment, and the corners of his mouth twitched in a subtle way. "You two are indeed a family." "Nonsense," Xiejin sneered, "Her Majesty the Queen personally granted the marriage. We are not a family. Are we the same family as you?" 2 against 1, Lingen was completely defeated. So he kept silent. The three of them just teased each other and made trouble, and soon returned to the coach's residence. Xian Yuanyao retreated all his soldiers and led Xiejin and Lingen directly into the study. "What is the situation in Fengxi?" Xiejin frowned slightly. "No longer as careless as before. Yao Yao and I judged that Ji Yunhui may have poisoned Fengxi, and we plan to find out the situation tonight." Lingen looked at the clothes on the two of them. "Are you going to wear this?" "No." Xian Yuanyao shook his head. "We need to wear thicker clothes and cover our faces. When we come back, we should take off our clothes and throw them away." Lingen interrupted him. "Ji Yunhui infected living people with the plague virus in Fengxi City. These people were all death row prisoners from the yamen of Shuashan, Kuiyang, Fengxi, and Jinwu. He sent these people in advance when they were taken into Fengxi. These death row prisoners were infected with a contagious disease. As soon as Dongling's army entered, they would be infected, and there is no cure for this disease, and those who are infected will die." As soon as the words fell, the air suddenly dropped to freezing point. Xian Yuanyao and Xiejin fell silent, their expressions cold and solemn. As expected, Xiejin sat on the chair. His eyes were narrow and a color as cold as frost flashed across his eyes. South Vietnam's tactics are not good, the soldiers and horses are vulnerable, and the general has no fighting power, so he can only use this how to deal with the enemy in a deceitful way. It's not that the tactics are not good, it's that the generals who are good at tactics were killed. Mo Lincoln said, you should still remember the Sushang before. He had a brave and good general under him, although he was not as famous as the Lord Yang Tianxia, but he is very capable in South Vietnam. If he can fight, even if Prince Yao wins the battle, it will not go so smoothly. Mo Lincoln said with a faint smile, but the general was killed by Ge Yunhui and the queen. He was involved in Suchang's case, and the whole family was executed. Xian Yuanyao sneered, so South Vietnam is destined to perish. It has exhausted its strength and there is no way to turn back. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 818. Mo Lincoln and Siejin didn't say anything, just looked at him quietly for a while. The atmosphere was a little heavy for no reason. What? Xian Yuanyao raised his eyebrows. What do you two mean by looking at me like this? Siejin said, what is Yao Yao going to do next? What to do next? Xian Yuanyao lowered his eyes and remained silent, staring at the map on the desk, his eyes fixed on the two words Fengshi, and he didn't say anything for a long time. No matter what the situation is with Fengshi, they must fight. If they don't break Fengshi, they can't take the capital of Nanyu. But the problem before them is that the Fengshi epidemic is fierce, and Xian Yuanyao can't risk the lives of his soldiers. Xian Yuanyao held his chin, lowered his eyes and thought for a moment. Use fire attack. Although Fengshi looks like an empty city, there are more than 10,000 people in the city. Mo Lincoln reminded him, if you use fire attack, these more than 10,000 people will be burned to death. Since more than 10,000 people are all death row prisoners in Nanyu, it proves that they are going to die anyway. What's the difference between dying early and late? Xian Yuanyao's tone was indifferent, as if the discussion was not about the life and death of 10,000 people. Besides, this is the decision of their own commander. What does it have to do with this general? Using the smallest price to exchange for the greatest victory is what the commander should do in war. Those death row prisoners have committed capital crimes and are now infected with the epidemic. They can't escape death anyway. Even if they don't use fire attack, they won't live long. Besides, there is no medicine to cure the poison, so they can only be burned. Isn't it for Ge Yunhui to bring the death row prisoners to Fengshi to let them become the source of infection again before they die? If we set fire to the city, people who don't know the truth will definitely attack in droves, and will do whatever it takes to attack the Dongling army. Mo Lincoln frowned and said, no matter if there are civilians living in the city or not, as long as someone wants to make a fuss about it, they will think that there are at least 20,000 civilians living in the city. If a fire burns down the city, the unarmed civilians will become the biggest handle in this war. The people of Fengshi had already been relocated, so the burning of the city would not implicate innocent people, but outsiders don't think so, and the people in the world who want to criticize and put Dongling in an unjust situation don't think so either. What they want is not the truth, but to use their unique way and words to put the Dongling Expeditionary Army on the charcoal fire, so that people all over the world will abuse and accuse them. Xian Yuanyao did not hesitate. This general does not care about the bad reputation. You do not care about your own reputation, do you not care about the reputation of Her Majesty the Queen? Mo Lincoln asked calmly. The Queen is the emperor chosen by the High Priest of Dongling. If she sets fire to the city, this is enough to be the best excuse for people to blame the Queen. Xian Yuanyao fell silent after hearing this. Because he knew that what Mo Lincoln said made sense. If it were another king, for his own ambitions, he might not care about the bad reputation of setting fire to kill the people, even if there were more crimes, but Her Majesty the Queen of Dongling was the emperor chosen by the High Priest on behalf of God. This is enough to constrain many of the emperor's actions. All behaviors that run counter to kindness and tolerance will be magnified countless times and severely criticized and abused. If the reputation of the Emperor of Dongling is damaged because of a city, it is definitely not what Xian Yuanyao and Xie Jin want to see. Xian Yuanyao frowned slightly. Burning the city is a necessary plan, otherwise we have to stop at Quyang. 60,000 cavalrymen traveled thousands of miles just to seize two cities on the border of Nanyu. Nanyu has not yet learned a lesson that will be unforgettable. This war cannot stop now. I do have a way, Xie Jin said calmly, but it will take some time. Mo Lingan and Xian Yuanyao turned to look at him at the same time. You can spread the news first. The king of Nanyu is unjust and has angered the heavens. The disaster has caused Fengshi and Jinwu to be invaded by the epidemic. The king is incompetent and has abandoned the people. This news will definitely cause an uproar in the world, Xie Jin said calmly, but not everyone can spread the news. You have to find someone who can convince people to say it. Convincing people? Xian Yuanyao frowned. Where is there anyone in the army who can convince the world? Search for famous doctors all over the world to treat the people of Fengshi, Mo Lingan said. You can post this notice and let the world know. Even famous doctors know the seriousness of the epidemic. Unless they are not afraid of death, there is no way that famous doctors are willing to come and die. It is best to let Juxiao Pavilion do this. Xie Jin smiled lightly. It would be best to explain how many people have died from the epidemic, how many people are left in the city, and how many people die every day. If there is a rough number, the panic caused and the effect will be greater. Xian Yuanyao listened to the two people's plan and suddenly said, are we considered three cobblers are better than Zhuge Liang? The two were silent, and then Xie Jin smiled and said, Yao Yao, we are three Zhuge Liangs. Mo Lingan rarely agreed with Xie Jin's words. Although I am unknown, I will never admit that I am a cobbler. I don't think it's necessary to go through so much trouble, Xian Yuanyao said. It's unnecessary to post notices and look for famous doctors. Just set fire to the city and announce it to the world. Just say that Ji Yunhui was defeated and fled to Fengshi. After being surrounded by the Dongling Iron Cavalry, he burned the city in anger, intending to drag everyone to be buried with him. He died in defeat, which is a worthy death. Mo Lingan did not comment. Burning the city is easy to say, but it is not easy to do. How to set the fire smoothly without being infected with the virus is what we should think about most at the moment. Fengshi is a total of 28 miles from south to north. A lot of tung oil needs to be prepared for the fire. Tung oil is not in short supply. There is ready-made tung oil in the Quyang city barracks. The only thing we should think about now is how to enter the city to pour the tung oil and light the fire. Is Ji Yunhui really in Fengshi city now? Xian Yuanyao raised his eyes and looked at Mo Lingan. Is there any secret passage in Fengshi that can be used for escape? If he used improper means to get the position of general, it would be unreasonable for him to die on the battlefield so soon, and Ji Yunhui looked like a person who was afraid of death. Mo Lingan said, before he led the troops to Quyang, he signed a military order in front of the emperor. After the defeat, not only would he die, but his entire family would also be dragged down. Now Fengshi is his last chance of survival. If the Dongling army can be buried here, even if he dies, the Ge family can at least be saved. Paused, and in order to consolidate her position, the queen has issued a strict order to him. It doesn't matter if Ge Yunhui dies. The key is whether he can make meritorious deeds before his death. Xian Yuanyao frowned. Who are these people in Nanyu? Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 819. The king is not a king, and the minister is not a minister. The general is afraid of death, and the queen is in chaos. There is no natural reason why South Vietnam should not perish. South Vietnam is indeed different from other countries. Mo Lincoln smiled lightly. Since Su Shang was killed, the fighting between various parties and factions in the court has become more and more fierce. The emperor thought that the throne was stable, but in fact it was in danger. Xian Yuanyao leaned back in his chair, his eyebrows slightly lowered, imagining how the Lord would make a choice if he were here and faced with Feng Shi's situation. Will he worry about the attacks and abuses from people all over the world? The answer is no. Lord, why does that person care about what others think? Anyone who dares to disobey will be beaten until he does. Xian Yuanyao calmed down slightly and raised his eyes to look at the two of them. It is imperative to burn the city, and there can be no delay. We will start taking action tonight. As soon as he said this, Mo Lincoln and Xie Jin looked at him with raised eyebrows. Xian Yuanyao stood up and said in a stern tone, "Here comes someone." The soldiers outside pushed the door open and knelt down on one knee. "General. Pass on Yufan, and Yi, Jinjun, Yang Ting." "Yes." The soldiers turned and left. Xian Yuanyao walked out and looked at the completely dark night outside. His eyebrows were heavy, his hands were behind his back, and he was silent, not knowing what he was thinking in his heart. Mo Lincoln and Xie Jin also followed out and stood outside the door, quietly looking at Xian Yuanyao's back. Xie Jin leaned against the door frame and said casually, "It is up to the soldiers to set the fire. I will lead Ming Yan and Ming Mei to pour the oil." Mo Lincoln said, "Count me in." Xian Yuanyao said nothing. After a while, the sound of horse hooves was heard outside the courtyard, and then the four people dismounted and hurried inside. "General. Jinjun, take people to prepare tung oil and arrows." "The more the better," Xian Yuanyao ordered. "Yang Ting, go and order 3,000 black obsidian troops and gather outside the city gate at 3 o'clock in the morning." "Yes." "And Yi, Yufan." Xian Yuanyao's gaze fell on the two of them. "Tonight the Black Obsidian Army attacks Feng Shi at night. You two are responsible for the security of Quyang City. No one is allowed to enter the city gate until dawn tomorrow morning." "Yes." "If we don't come back within 3 days, and Yi, you will be responsible for commanding the Black Obsidian Army, and Yufan will be responsible for the Golden Armor Army." "General, what do you mean?" Yufan frowned. "You haven't returned within 3 days? What are you going to do, General?" And Yi and the other 3 generals also looked at Xian Yuanyao with solemn expressions on their faces. "So much nonsense." Xian Yuanyao's face darkened. "This general is just telling you what to do if anything happens. It's not that I want to die. As the coach in front of the battle, the general must not risk his own life." Yufan knelt down on one knee. "The general disagrees." "General Yupian is right," and Yi said in a deep voice. "The general is the backbone of the Obsidian Army and the Golden Armor Army. Generals are needed to command operations and strategize on the battlefield. How can a general take risks and abandon his responsibilities? Regardless." "The general doesn't agree either." After finishing speaking, Jinjun and Yang Ting said in unison, "General, please think again." Xian Yuanyao's face darkened. "Shut up, everyone. The generals are right. As a general, Prince Yao really shouldn't put himself in danger." Mo Lincoln said calmly, "So tonight's operation will be completed by Xie Jin and I, together with Ming Ye and Ming Mei. That's it. Crown Prince Yao should still stay in the army and command the battle." Xian Yuanyao turned to look at him. "Mo Lincoln, you are responsible for intelligence." "I also think Mr. Mo is right." Xie Jin interrupted Xian Yuanyao's words without hesitation. His eyes fell on the little leopard's face, and met his insistent eyes. "The 4 of us are enough to complete the task. Promise not to hold back the general." Xian Yuanyao's expression was solemn. "Xie Jin, on the battlefield you must either obey military orders or return home. If you disobey military orders, you will be punished by military law. Xiejin said calmly, I am willing to accept it. Xian Yuanyao pursed his lips and looked at him. Yao Xiejin walked up to him, his voice softened, I know you have your own responsibilities, but the general's responsibility is to ensure your own safety at all times, otherwise you will be irresponsible for the lives of thousands of soldiers. Lingen and I can complete the operation tonight. You don't need to go. I guarantee that everyone will come back safe and sound. If you can't do it, you will be punished by military law. As he spoke, he whispered in his ear, the imperial study room is still soaked in rattan. Do you think I dare to mess around? Xian Yuanyao frowned, it has been soaked so long that the rattan has already rotted. Can it still be used? There is nothing else in the palace. There are many things to beat people. Xiejin curled his lips, there are so many ways to punish people in the inner court. There is nothing they can't do except what you can't think of. Do you mean to send you to the inner court? Xiejin chuckled, if Yao Yao can't bear it, I have no objection. Mo Lingen looked up at the sky, really wanting to kick these two crooked guys to the edge of the sky. Xian Yuanyao's tone was cold, even if I can bear it, I'm afraid I don't have the power. The legitimate son of the Xie family, who dares to send him to the inner court to be punished? Xiejin coughed slightly and lowered his voice further, don't you still have Yao Yao's family skills? Xian Yuanyao glared at him. I'm embarrassed to kiss you in front of so many people. Xiejin's voice was so low that it was almost inaudible, Yao Yao, it's important to attack the city, don't stop inking. Xian Yuanyao frowned and said coldly, start taking action. Got the order. Xiejin and Mo Lingen left first, taking Ming Yan and Ming Mei with them, flying out quickly as fast as wind and lightning. Xian Yuanyao followed them from a distance until he could no longer see the four figures, then he said in a deep voice, prepare the troops and stand by, and set off in half an hour. Yes. Outside the city gate at midnight, several teams of cavalry slowly walked out, torches illuminating the dense military formation in front of them, and the firelight reflected on their resolute and cold faces. They were all solemn and outstanding, with a strong momentum. The tall horses carried the iron-bone tough guys, and the armor and cloaks fluttered in the night wind. Tonight, Fengshi must be destroyed in one fell swoop. Xian Yuanyao said, let's go. The sound of horse hooves was dull like thunder, trampling the quiet night. The night was like a beast that devoured everything, and the cavalry was surging. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 820. At night, Fengshi City was as quiet as death. Xiejin and Mo Lingen were both dressed in black, dressed like Ming Mei and Ming Nightmare. They were covered with black scarves, and even their hands and feet were wrapped in black cloth. They were like ghosts walking through the high city walls. Go up and pour buckets of tung oil into every corner of Fengshi City. They even had free time to pour oil and pay attention to the situation in the city. Of course, no matter how they investigated, the results would be the same. Where are those death row prisoners infected with the epidemic poisoned? It's definitely not possible to spread out the death row prisoners. Ge Yunhui doesn't know what method he used to control these people. Mo Lingen said, they should be separated and detained separately, and if Ge Yunhui had a little bit of brain, they should not all be asleep at this moment, but arranged for people to pay attention to the trends in the city and pay attention to the situation outside the city. However, there must be a method of detention, and it must be ensured that these death row prisoners will not run around or go out to inform the soldiers. Although the South Vietnamese death row prisoners seem to have no reason to report the news to the Tanglan soldiers, at the moment of life and death, no one is sure what they can do. Things come up. It is not impossible for prisoners on death row to commit treason if they are eager to seek medical treatment or want to take revenge on the imperial court. It's not appropriate to stay here for a long time. Mo Lincoln dropped the empty oil drum in his hand and said calmly, "We need to leave here as soon as possible." As soon as he finished speaking, the sound of bells and drums suddenly sounded in the city. Boom! 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 Mo Lincoln and Siejin frowned at the same time, and then they saw a figure in black crossing the line of sight at an extremely fast speed, quickly heading south. "Dead soldiers," Ming Yan said. "There are actually dead soldiers in Fengshi City." He must have noticed the night attack of the army and was on his way to report the attack. Ming Mei thought for a moment, then turned to look at Siejin. "Go down and kill him." After finishing his words, before Siejin could speak, his body flew away like lightning. Siejin was about to stop him, but Ming Mei had already disappeared. "It's just random." Siejin's brows turned cold. "A dead man appears in the city and is a dead end. Do you need him to take action?" Ming Yan stood aside and said with a lowered eyebrow, "It is not yet certain how many dead soldiers are hidden in the city, but these dead soldiers can detect the night attack of the army in advance, allowing them to take precautions. Secondly, the dead soldiers are already running. They are destined to die. If they take the epidemic out of the city and sneak into the army, the consequences will be disastrous." Siejin turned to look at him. "We are not yet sure how many dead soldiers there are in the city." Ming Yan nodded. "Please go and investigate." Siejin was silent. Ming Yan and Ming Mei came to check last night, but they did not dare to approach last night. Instead, they returned to Quyang City early, not because they were afraid of death, but because they were worried about being infected with the epidemic virus and bringing the epidemic virus into Quyang City. But things were different tonight. Once Ming Mei and Ming Knight enter the city, regardless of whether they will be infected with the epidemic virus, just as a precaution, they will not return to Quyang tonight, so they are not worried about spreading it to others. Siejin obviously understood their plan and said calmly, "Ling'an, you stay outside to take care of them, I'll go with Ming Yan." "What nonsense are you talking about?" Mo Ling'an turned around and looked around. "Since we are here, there is no distinction between high and low in life, let's go together." After saying that, he ran away in another direction. Siejin said, "Action." Ming Yan accepted the order, "Yes." The four people separated and went in four directions. An ominous atmosphere filled the air. There were no lights in Fengshi City, and the four of them were all covered in black, perfectly blending into the night. They all relied on the sense of smell of martial arts practitioners to move flexibly through the city. Suddenly, Ming Yan slowed down, regained his strength, and then froze his steps not far from a sycamore tree. Holding the dagger in his hand, he stared coldly at the figure hiding under the sycamore tree. The other person was also dressed in black, with a slender figure, eyes that were lifeless and lifeless. "You can commit suicide," Ming Yan said, his voice calm, "this saves me the trouble." The dead soldier in black clenched the scimitar in his hand and did not move. However, whether it was the opponent's momentum or the cold and calm tone of his voice, he felt an overwhelming pressure coming from all directions. Cold sweat began to break out from the palm of the dead soldier's hand holding the scimitar. Nether Nightmare didn't have much time or patience to deal with him. He flashed like a charm and raised the dagger in his hand horizontally. He seemed to have done nothing, and then seemed to move very quickly, then stopped. Not moving. The dead man holding the scimitar fell to the ground with a thud before he started to take action. On the neck, wrapped in black clothes, a red mark as thin as a hair began to slowly bleed. The figure of Ninjian swept away and disappeared into the night in an instant. The cavalry army outside the city is galloping towards Fengshi, getting closer and closer to Fengshi. 30 miles, 28 miles, 25 miles. Siejin stood under an eaves, his dark eyes fixed on the opposite corner. There was a man standing there. A masked man in black. It's not Ming Yan, not Ming Mei. Although he is dressed similarly and has a tall and thin figure, his aura is different. His eyes are filled with a deadly murderous aura. Siejin seemed to have seen it, but also seemed not to see it. He just slowly raised his steps and walked over. The man immediately tightened his grip on the scimitar in his hand. Siejin held the dagger. Although the length of the weapon will have a great advantage in a duel between masters, for the shadow guards who are used to killing with one blow, the dagger is lighter and more practical. The premise is that his speed must be fast enough and his aim is more accurate. When Siejin uses the killing trick, his skills are equivalent to those of the shadow guards. The senses of the death warrior in front of him are sharp, and he feels the murderous aura particularly strongly. He can clearly sense the breath of death exuded from Siejin at this time, the extreme calmness that the other party is already a dead man in his eyes. Obviously, in Siejin's eyes, this death warrior is already a dead man. Even if he is not dead at this moment, he will die in the next moment. As expected. When the death warrior couldn't help but start to attack under pressure, he found uneasy that the person in front of him suddenly disappeared from his sight, and then, a breeze blew in the air, he felt a pain in his neck, and suddenly lost all resistance. The iron cavalry 20 miles away was getting closer. 18 miles, 16 miles, 13 miles. Siejin stood by the wall in silence for a moment, turned around, and rushed to the north. There was a body lying under the tree. Siejin ignored it and walked through the long street and stopped outside the gate of a mansion. Ji Yunhui is in the secret room. Ming Mei stood in the wide courtyard, wondering if she was waiting for Siejin. Siejin didn't say anything, stepped into the gate, and walked to the inner courtyard with Ming Mei. He pushed open the door of the study, and Ming Mei stepped forward to press the mechanism, and the secret door of the secret room slowly opened. The lights were bright, and a man in gold silk soft armor sat on a wide chair. Two black-clothed masked warriors stood on his left and right. The four of them had dull eyes and stood still like stone sculptures. General Ge Siejin looked at the man sitting on the chair, and raised a polite arc at the corner of his mouth. "Nice to meet you." Ji Yunhui's pupils shrank suddenly, and his eyes flashed with a cold and sharp cold light. "Who are you?" "Murderer, assassin, enemy." Siejin smiled. "General Ge can call you whatever you want."